So, Alhamdulillah, last time we heard about the increase of the efforts of Quraysh to try and stop this new fledgling religion and the da'wat, and everything that they attempt and every initiative that they take, it backfires on them. And the Islam is spreading, and it's spreading in all of the tribes, among some of the influentials, as well as not only the downtrodden and the poor and the destitute, but also there are individuals from all of the various major tribes of Quraysh. And as we mentioned, and that brought about clashes even in the family, between children and parents, between brothers, between uncles and aunts and cousins and so forth and so on. So we've got really a very intense situation in Makkah. And we mentioned also that during this period also Surah Kahf is mentioned, and the narrative of those young men who, in the face of similar type of oppression, found their way towards refuge in the Kahf, in the cave. And shortly after that, in the 5th year of Hijri, perhaps that might have been around the 4th, and then towards the 5th year of Hijri, now the Quraysh advances their efforts and becomes more and more difficult. And many very harrowing experiences are mentioned in the books of Sirah. So now Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam orders a very strategic move. Now, generally it's understood that yes, because the trials and tribulations are becoming so intense, the Muslims need to find some place where they can exist. But that's not the whole story. That's true. However, the migration to Ethiopia was an extremely strategic move by Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam. Keeping in mind that where would the Muslims go? Because they go to the north, east, south, west, it's pretty much the same scenario. Anywhere in the Arabian Peninsula, they're going to be faced with pretty much the same situation. In Ethiopia, however, there was the king, the Negus, his name was Ashama, radiallahu anhu, because he actually accepted Islam and he died as a Muslim. A very wonderful story about him. So he was a very famous king, and he was also the authority, the Christian authority. And in Ethiopia, they were also the followers of Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam. It was a very ancient stronghold of early Christians. That's why I went to Ethiopia when I actually left the country to go to Ethiopia before I knew much about Islam, and I thought that they have the original teachings of Isa alayhi salam in the mountains of Ethiopia, and I thought I'd find that information with the monks. Well, when I reached there, I found that there were monks in the mountains but I found out the real information that I was seeking. It was Islam. And Ethiopia is, at that particular time, that was over 50 years ago, but I'm assuming that it's probably much the same. It was half of the population of Ethiopia were Muslims, which is what probably people don't realize. But if you just reflect, that was the first place of migration before Medina. So the migration to Ethiopia, to Abyssinia, was before the migration to Ethiopia. And you could say the first stable community of Islam was established in Ethiopia. This is very interesting. So Nabi alayhi salatu wasalam said it wasn't simply because of the physical torture, because if you look at the list of the people who actually migrated, you have luminaries from all of the various major tribes. You have Sayyidina Uthman, you have Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, who was the leader of the entire group, and others who were very prominent figures. So it wasn't just people who were being physically tortured. These people were basically pretty well situated where they weren't facing physical difficulties, but of course they were facing mockery, they were facing tension and stress. But nevertheless, there's something much more significant perhaps, and that is that an alliance is being formed also with Ethiopia, because after all, the Ethiopians are closer to Islam than the Arabs of Arabia, because they are, after all, the followers of Isa alayhi salam, and more or less people of the Abrahamic tradition. And so Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam forged an alliance also with them, and this alliance became very strong, and Sayyidina Ja'far radiallahu ta'ala anhu ends up remaining there for 15 years. And even after most of them went back, and they went back at different intervals, but some of the Muslims remained there for up to 15 years. So there was a strategic operation taking place there. And also, the Ethiopians would have related closer to these new Muslims, to this new deen, than they would to the pagan Arabs, because after all, they were idol worshippers, and that was totally unacceptable to them. So in any case, it's a fantastic story. We could spend quite a long time on that, and there's so many lessons from that, but just a basic overview of it. So as things became more and more difficult, so Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam mentioned that you should now migrate to Ethiopia, and there, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam mentioned, there is a king that no one faces injustice at his hands. And this was in fact the case. So Sayyidina Ja'far radiallahu anhu proceeds, perhaps Uthman radiallahu anhu proceeded before him. So whether they went in larger contingents or they went, a few families at a time, as it were, there's different documentation, but in any case, there was it ultimately ended up with over 80 individuals from the men and perhaps 16 to 19 of the lady folks. And so now when they reach to Ethiopia, and obviously they did so secretly, just as Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam migrated secretly, so did these people, because obviously Quraysh, not only they don't want to let them out of Makkah to enjoy a better life, but there's something more important. They probably were smart enough and had enough political acumen to realize if they get to Ethiopia, this is not going to be good for us, because we have very important ties with Ethiopia politically and commercially, and this might really be not only bad that the Muslims are finding secure over there and safety, and they can multiply. They can also perhaps add to their numbers, and more people can join them, and they can develop a very strong sort of base there. At the same time, they may forge an alliance with the Ethiopians, and that would be very serious. So now, what do? So Amr ibn al-As, radiallahu anhu, who was not a Muslim at that time, he was, you could say, the ambassador of Quraysh in their important political moves or their commercial operations. Whenever they had something strategic to discuss or work out some sort of arrangement with other foreign countries, they would send Amr. He was, they call him Duhat, Dahiyatun min Duhat al-Arab, from among the geniuses and the political geniuses of the Arabs. And he was very eloquent, and he was very clever, very intelligent, and very tactful, very diplomatic. So he was sent, and another individual, to influence the Najashi to send these people back. And so they reached, and not only that, but they also had a good plan to sort of secure their release. And so they amassed quite a lot of very valuable gifts, and the Ethiopians, they liked leather goods. That was something that they really liked. And they say that even they had a full camel skin that they prepared specially for the Najashi. And the idea was to bribe all of all of the big shots around Najashi and get them all on their side, and then to help influence the Najashi, because it's not going to be an easy job to have Najashi hand over people whom he has given the promise of safety. As you know, that was a very important thing in tribal integrity. If I give my word that you're safe, that was a matter of pride for me, that nobody can touch you, and I'm going to keep my word. And that was a very important aspect of their culture, and that was a matter of honor for them. So it wasn't going to be easy to get Najashi to hand these people over, so they intended to bribe all of the generals and the cabinet members and the people around the Najashi. So they came with all of these presents and briefed them that, look, this is our mission and you're going to help us, right? Ah, definitely. And at the same time, they would tell them, these people have left our religion, they're not in your religion, they're not in our religion, they come with this new thing, and so you're going to help us, right? Right. So now they have their meeting with the Najashi. And now the Najashi says, okay, what's the issue? The issue is that we have these youngsters that, were there with us, and they've changed their religion. It's not your religion, it's not our religion, it's something, imaginary that they made up, and they have actually caused a lot of travail, and they need to be sent back to their people. And their fathers and their uncles and their family members have deputed us for this mission, and they know better about their situation than anyone, and they're all in agreement that they need to come back home, and you should kindly send them off with us. And so now the cabinet members, they're all bribed anyway, and they're all buttered up. Yeah, absolutely. Now Najashi, being, as Rasulullah said, was that man of integrity, he said, anyway, we have to listen to two sides of the story. And I'm not going to hand over people whom I've given security until I hear their side of the story. So now the Muslims are called, and they realize that now these emissaries have come, Ahmad has come, and they're trying to get the release and get them sent off. So they make mashwara, and Sayyidina Ja'far radiallahu anhu, not only he was from a very prominent family, he was obviously the son of Abu Talib, who was the chief of Bani Hashim, but he was also very beautiful and handsome and very eloquent, very intelligent. So he, as spokesman, presented on their behalf. He said, so what is this religion of yours that you have? Tell us about this. This is their claim. What is your response? So Sayyidina Ja'far radiallahu anhu very eloquently explained that, O king, we were an ignorant people who worshipped idols. We used to eat the carrion, the dead meat. We would bury the daughters. We had very vile practices. And then Allah was kind to us and sent a prophet who taught us about his oneness and taught us about kindness and akhlaq and kindness to the relatives and all good practices. And when we believed in him and started practicing these beautiful prophetic teachings, our people, they opposed us and they tortured us, and it became so intense that we came to you, and you have been so gracious to grant us safety. And we're assuming, and we have every hope that you're not going to return us to them, and you would have understood our position as well. So Najashi, hearing this, said, yes, absolutely. That's quite reasonable. And therefore, whoever I've given security to, I'm not going to send them back. So now, this delegation from Quraysh is now, left high and dry. However, Amr, being the politician that he was, and being adamant to secure their deportation, he came up with a plan. He said, well, what we'll do is, we will tell things to the Najashi that will make it impossible for him to keep them around, and he'll definitely send them off. So what's that? He said, we'll tell them that they have this blasphemy against Jesus. They don't believe he's the Son of God. They say he's a slave. No, the Christians say that he's the Son of God, or maybe he's God himself, and now these people are saying he's nothing of the kind. He is a slave of Allah. That'll do it. So even the fellow who came with him, he said, wait a minute, that's going too far. That's going to really, after all, there are blood relatives. We just want to see, we don't want, they might really go off the handle on them in this case. Anyway, Amr was adamant. He went to them, to the king, and he said, this is the fact. There's something I didn't tell you, and that was that they claim that Jesus is not the Son of God, he is the slave. In fact, probably mentioned that they say something very vulgar and blasphemous about Jesus. So you better hear about what they have to say. So Najashi, being in all fairness, said, okay, let them defend themselves, let them give their point. So again, Ja'far was brought in. This time they're even more, you could imagine, concerned what's going to be the outcome now. And they're going to ask him, what's your belief? And they know very well that they have this belief. قَدْ كَفَرَ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّ اللَّهُ وَثَالِثُ ثَلَاثَةٍ قَدْ كَفَرَ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّ that people have done kufr who say such kind of things, that Isa is the Son of God, or he is God himself, or that God is three, which are the basic beliefs of the Christians of that time. So now what is he going to say? How can he be politically correct? And this is a very important lesson for us. To be politically correct is to be correct. That's the only thing. To tell the truth is the only solution. You can tell the truth nicely, you can tell it diplomatically, but you tell the truth. The whole truth and nothing but the truth. And that's exactly what they determined to do. And this is exactly what Sayyidina Ja'far did. So when he was brought, he said, well, what do you say about Isa? He said, we say about Isa exactly what our Prophet ﷺ taught us, which was revealed to him in the book. And that is that Isa ﷺ is the slave of Allah and his messenger. And from the spirit of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ruhun min, and born of the Virgin Mary, just as the Christians also believe. So now, the smaller priests and religious figures, they get all bent out of shape when they hear that, right? Slave of Allah, we're saying he's the son of Allah. But Najashi, being more knowledgeable and more closer to fitrah, realized that obviously this is exactly what Isa said. He said nothing more. As a matter of fact, he picked up a small twig off the floor. He said, Isa salam has not said anything more than that, and in terms of different to what you've said. In other words, whatever you have said, this is exactly what Jesus himself said of himself. And now the priest and the clergy, they get all, totally out of control what's going on. And he says, regardless of what you people think, this is what he said. And then he said, okay, do you have anything from the Quran, from this book that you're reciting? Do you have anything from that? And so Ja'far very adeptly and very appropriately read something from Surah Maryam. And by the way, the Surah Maryam is a surah which is not only named after Sayyidah Maryam alayhi salam, but also Maryam is the one woman in the Quran which is mentioned by her name. So there's a lot more. We've probably mentioned that from time to time when we're talking in Tafsir of Surah Ali Imran. And so in there he reads. Now it's very interesting what the narrations of that is that now, of course, they don't understand Arabic directly. And the speech of Ja'far is being translated by the translators to Najashi and the others. But when Ja'far reads the Quran, which they're not understanding probably, immediately in Arabic until it's translated to them, it's narrated as Ja'far is reading from Surah Maryam. They just all break down and start to weep, And then when it's translated, what the meanings of it is, and then the whole story of Maryam alayhi salam and how Jibreel alayhi salam came, and then the child was conceived, and then she went out, and then ultimately the child was brought, and then it came, and that whole narration which is mentioned in Surah Maryam. And they just weep, and they say until their beards were soaked with their tears. So Najashi says, yes, these people are our guests, and they are in our protection, and no one is to touch them and harm them. And you fellows, take your presents and your camels' hides and whatever, and go back whence you've come. And they were sent back kha'ibin. So now the Muslims remain there. Now there is an aftermath to all of this, which since we've taken our quota of time and people are getting a bit fidgety, so we'll keep that for. There's a very interesting aftermath and also sequences that take place as a result of this hijrah that we'll talk about in our next lesson, inshallah, which are very critical for the development of Islam thereafter. Subhanakallah bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka